preserved. The fog hung thick over the Seine, draping the river like a scorned lover refusing to let go. Wisps of mist coiled possessively around the wrought iron lampposts that lined the narrow Parisian streets, dimming their glow as if mourning alongside her. Alara Moreau stood beneath one such light, her gloved hand clenched tightly around a fistful of crumpled letters. Remnants of trust now destroyed. The delicate parchment was blotched with tears and rain, the ink smeared yet still legible enough to betray Adrian's unmistakable looping script. His words sang of love, of longing, for another woman. A cabaret singer named Isolde. Alara didn't need to imagine her. The scent of Isolde's perfume still clung to Adrian's collar, a sickly sweet floral musk that turned Alara's stomach. She moved swiftly now, her heels striking the cobblestones with sharp, angry clicks, each step echoing off the stone like a warning shot. The streets were deserted, the city asleep, unaware that a heart was breaking quietly under the weight of moonlight and betrayal. Her emerald cloak flared behind her, a billowing wave of velvet that caught the breeze and fluttered like a morning flag. Tonight, the Seine would listen to her pain. Tonight, something would be buried beneath its cold, endless surface. Send me the next part whenever you're ready, and I'll keep building it in the same voice. Expanded version of that passage, keeping the mystery and dark elegance intact. From the thick curtain of mist, a figure emerged as if conjured by the very pain coursing through Alara's chest. He did not walk so much as glide, the fog parting respectfully at his feet. "Chère madame," he said, his voice like velvet drawn over a blade, smooth, dangerous, alluring. "Vengeance tastes sweeter than despair, non." Alara froze, her heart thudding beneath her ribs as she took in the man who now stood beneath the lamp's wan light. Lucien Devereux. He introduced himself with nothing more than a glance and a glint of teeth. His face was all sharp angles and pale composure, a sculpture carved from moonlight and shadow. He wore a charcoal suit so precisely tailored it looked stitched from midnight itself. A black diamond glinted coldly from the ring on his finger as he tipped his hat, the gesture old-fashioned yet somehow perfectly timed. "One night," he murmured, stepping closer, his eyes a vivid, unnatural, the sickly green of absinthe, intoxicating, impossible to look away from. "One night to unravel your husband, to tear him apart thread by thread as he did to you. All I ask is..." He paused, the smile that curved his lips as elegant as it was empty. "A trifle." Alara's breath caught. "Your soul. Send the next part when you're ready. I'll keep it seamless." Here's the expanded version of that haunting moment, keeping the seductive tension and gothic elegance. Alara let out a laugh, sharp, brittle, laced with disbelief. It cracked the silence like glass underfoot. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling just enough to betray the war inside her. Fear against fury, sorrow against seduction. Lucien didn't flinch. He stepped closer with the patience of a predator, his presence consuming the air around her. The scent of bergamot drifted from his collar, clean, refined, yet underneath it lurked something darker, the scorched whisper of ash and ancient things. He leaned in just enough for her to feel his breath, not warm, not cold, but otherworldly. "You won't," he said almost gently. "I've seen your heart, Alara. It's not forgiveness you crave." His eyes gleamed in the darkness, burning green. "It's fire." Something cold and heavy landed in her palm before she realized he had even moved. A pendant. No, a promise, cut from night itself. A diamond, black as sorrow, dangled from a fine silver chain, glinting like a shard of ice in her hand. "Wear this," Lucien said, his voice velvet and command all at once. "When you wake, it binds the spell. But know this. If dawn breaks and I don't love you..." He paused, letting the silence fall like a curtain. "It turns to dust." His gaze locked on hers. "And so do you. Ready for the next part whenever you are. Let's..." Here's your expanded version, keeping the elegance, the drama, and that slow burn unraveling of Adrian's world. Adrian's downfall began fittingly at the stroke of midnight. Like a curse released into the veins of Paris, it spread with merciless precision. By 1:03 a.m., the Le Figaro printing presses thundered to life, churning out front pages like damning gospel. "Art collector exposed Dubois Gauguin a forgery." The headlines screamed in bold ink, shaking the elite to their bones. By 2:17, the polished brass knocker of their Houseman mansion echoed with fury. Creditors, lawyers, and former friends turned scavengers, demanding repayment, justice, blood. Inside, Alara stood on the iron balcony, the cold biting through her silk nightgown. She didn't shiver. Below her, the city stirred with scandal, its facades glowing faintly beneath gaslight and shame. Lucian leaned casually beside her, one elbow resting on the ornate railing, his gaze not on the city, but on her. He studied her in silence, as though memorizing the angle of her jawline, the way the wind played with the strands of her dark hair. "Regrets?" he asked at last, his tone unreadable. Neither cruel nor kind, just curious. Alara's hands gripped the balustrade tighter, her knuckles pale against the wrought iron. Her lips curled, not into a smile, but something fiercer, satisfaction. "Only that I didn't summon you sooner," she said. This story is building beautifully. Ready when you are for the next part. Here's your expanded version, keeping the tone rich, elegant, and deliciously wicked. At precisely 3:55 a.m., under the pale glow of crystal chandeliers and gossip-thick air, they entered Adrian's gala at the Ritz. The city's elite, still drunk on champagne and scandal, barely noticed the shift in atmosphere until it was far too late. Lucian had dressed Alara in a gown the color of dried blood, a liquid silk creation that clung to her like sin. The neckline plunged, Zanac studded with onyx stones that gleamed like tears frozen in mid-fall. As he fastened a black velvet choker around her throat, set with a single obsidian gem, he leaned in close, his breath warm against her skin. "A queen," he murmured, adjusting the clasp with reverent fingers, "deserves armor." Alara walked into the ballroom like a storm in slow motion. Whispers trailed in her wake, but she paid them no mind. Her gaze swept the room, catching on Adrian's familiar figure across the floor, surrounded, smiling, unaware. Not for long. The eruption came minutes later. Isolde burst into the ballroom, mascara smudged, hair wild with theatrical grief. The entire room stilled as she screamed, "Adrian promised me everything!" Her voice cracked perfectly like a diva mid-opera. From the folds of her crimson shawl, she hurled a bundle of love letters into the champagne fountain, their delicate pages fanning like broken wings. Gasps echoed from the walls. Glasses clinked nervously. Adrian went pale. Alara lifted her wineglass, its ruby contents catching the light. She took a slow, measured sip, the corners of her mouth barely twitching. Lucian stood close behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back. Not a comfort, but a claim. "You orchestrated this," she whispered, not turning to face him. He smiled, the expression wicked and strangely proud. "You did," he corrected smoothly. "I merely loosened the threads. Keep it coming. This is decadent." Here's the expanded version of this beautifully intense rooftop moment, keeping all the elegance, danger, and undercurrents of power play intact. They fled to the rooftop through a narrow stairwell veiled in velvet shadows, the sound of Adrian's fury growing fainter with every step. By the time they pushed open the iron door, the night had swallowed his voice entirely. Paris stretched out below them, opulent, breathless, unforgiving. The city glittered like a jeweled serpent coiled in pleasure and corruption, every rooftop a secret, every light a sin. Lucian struck a match with a flick of his gloved thumb. The flame danced briefly before surrendering to the tip of his cigarette, the ember flaring red, like the eye of some patient watching demon. Alara leaned against the stone ledge, her breath frosting in the chill air. "Why the theatrics?" she asked, turning toward him. "You could have killed him quietly. A fall, a poison, something clean." Lucian inhaled slowly, then exhaled a ribbon of smoke that curled like a question mark. "Where's the art in that?" he said, voice low, eyes glinting. "You didn't want justice, you wanted spectacle. You wanted him to feel it, to stand trembling in the ruins of his carefully painted life, knowing he signed every stroke." Below them, the distant sound of strings floated upward. He pulled her close with fluid precision, his steps measured like a ritual. Around them, the city spun in silence, a blur of gold and shadow as he twirled her under the moonlight. Alara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from something older, deeper, unnamed. "You're not what I expected," she murmured, meeting his gaze. Lucian's lips curved, that sly half-smile returning. His thumb brushed lightly against the curve of her waist, possessive and reverent. Neither are you, he said. Most scream. Bargain. Beg. But you. He leaned in, his voice dark silk against her ear. You burn. This is shaping up into something truly seductive and powerful. Want to continue with what happens at dawn? Here's the expanded final passage, preserving your tone. Ethereal, cinematic, and heavy with meaning. At exactly 6:01 a.m., the diamond pendant around Alara's neck disintegrated into a fine shimmer of ash. It scattered across her collarbone, vanishing before it touched the ground. The spell, the bond, whatever dark alchemy had stitched their fates together, broken. Lucian was already gone. The rooftop was empty, save for the last of the mist unraveling into the morning light. In his place, resting delicately on the stone parapet, was a single white rose. Its petals were tinged with frost, impossibly pristine. Around its slender stem coiled a silk ribbon, and tucked beneath it, a small folded note in that unmistakable script. A bientôt, ma flamme. Until we meet again, my flame. By 6:15, Alara stood in the ruins of what was once her sanctuary. The library was a shambles. Books toppled, glass cracked, velvet drapes torn down like old lies. In the center of it all knelt Adrian, barefoot,